Welcome to the American Regularis podcast. This is maybe episode number 32. I've had a slight discrepancy. I'm going to call it episode number 32A, and then from there on, I think we're going to be good. A lot of reasons it could have happened. I think mainly because I was tired and can't count very good. But it doesn't matter what number it is. We've got a lot of good stuff coming your guys' way. I'm happy you're listening. My name is JD Walter. Like and subscribe, YouTube, iTunes, wherever it is that you want to go. Give me a good rating. Get a hold of me. Follow me on Twitter at reg_American1. All right. Got that out of the way. Let's jump right into it. Huge week. We are not going to get into Iran sending missiles over to Israel and Tel Aviv. That'll, I think as that develops more, we're certainly going to get into it. But apologies if that's what you were wanting to hear when we tuned in. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to that today. I did want to talk about a couple of things that I think are very interesting and that I think I've got linked together fairly well here. Of course, besides Iran, Israel, and excuse me for my voice today, losing it a little bit, but it is bothering me, and I'll probably have to edit out some throat clearing throughout this podcast. All right, we're going to talk about the presidential debate, and I should say vice presidential debate. J.D. Vance versus, good first name, or initials, whatever you want to call it. J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz, a.k.a., what do they call him, Tampon Tim, for putting, wanting to put tampons in the boys' locker room, right? These are the guys. These are the debate guys. Vance has been routinely lambasted for being weird. They made up jokes about him involving a couch. And Walz has been portrayed not inaccurately as Coach Dad, right? Coach Dad, teacher, Midwestern yokel, and he kind of hams it up when he talks to Kamala with the little act, the little staged conversation about his white guy tacos and stuff. He kind of plays the part, really leans into being all shucks Coach Dad. The debate was interesting. It was more cordial than debates have been for a long time. I think America was probably ready for that. Not that these things matter too much. I also think it might have been good for the Trump's campaign because a lot of people find him off-putting for the constant kind of aggression. Whereas J.D. Vance, I think, speaks by far the best of the four candidates. Trump, Harris, Vance, Walz. I think Vance is by far the best speaker. And then for him to be able to more eloquently put Trump's policies across and doing it without a way that makes, the left and independents maybe seethe with anger or rage, I think that was probably good. Overall, it wasn't dominating, but like J.D. Vance came out smelling better. It just won't matter that much because it was a vice presidential debate, and I just have trouble believing there's really that many independents a month out that are just scratching their heads saying they don't know who they're going to pick or who they're not. I mean, they got to be out there, but into what number, I'm not sure. So regardless of how much impact this debate had, I thought it was interesting. Vance sounded good on several issues. I mean, I had my issues with a lot of the policies, especially foreign policy. Trump is terrible at. The tariffs are just terrible. But where the Republican weakness is on their ticket, it's probably the main reason I think America would fare better with them than with the Democrats because, I mean, look, those tariffs are dumb. Biden's economics have just been god-awful. It's we're shooting for a D- over an F or a low F or whatever. And then foreign policy, I mean, it was very unimpressive to me. But if we want a chance, like our chances of World War III are much worse, I believe, with a Kamala Harris presidency with the deep state running behind her. We got to have something pushing against that current. And I mean, the neocons in charge, the State Department, they are just licking their chops for war. And so for Trump to serve as some sort of bulwark towards that, I think that validates rooting for him. A few other things. Usually these things aren't decided on policy. It's on flubs, or it's on this moment, or impressions. Very few people actually look at it and go policy by policy because their minds are already made up. They're left or right, or they lean one way or the other enough. But J.D. Vance, he won the debate, not based off policies is what I'm saying, but he won based off how well he speaks. He looked calm and poised. And Walz speaks better than Harris, certainly speaks better than Biden. And he's, I mean, I can't stand his policies. But the coach dad thing, like I said, it's not the most unflattering or whatever. Like he seems sort of relatable. I mean, as far as a politician is concerned, a socialist politician is concerned. But I think his major hang-up in terms of the general public viewing, he's very animated face, and I think I have that too to an extent, so I'm not dragging him for that. But his face is very animated on stuff, and so when J.D. Vance would say something that he disagreed with, like Kamala kind of gave like a little smirk or a wry smile, like, you idiot, I can't believe you said that, or go ahead and dig. And look, maybe it annoyed you. I'm sure it did if you don't like her, and I don't know who does. But it wasn't that bad. When Walz would hear something he didn't like, he would like duck, lower his head, and swing it towards Vance like he just heard somebody, I don't know, like he just heard the surprise of his life. He would look aghast or thunderstruck by things that weren't all that revolutionary or revelatory for you to hear from a Republican. But the way he did it didn't come off as, I can't believe you said that, as in, I'm going to bury you with this, or you're hanging yourself with your own rope. It really came off more as like, what? Like, that would be if you were watching it on mute. You would assume that was the noise coming out of his microphone. Like, what? So I think that was his biggest thing. And you've seen a lot of the memes on the internet. There's like the meme of Vance is kind of like sideways grinning into the camera, and Tim Walz looks shocked. Like, it reminded me of the way pro wrestlers are bad actors. And when I was a kid, there'd be some sort of, I can't believe this guy just walked out with a microphone. And they would just sit there on the stage, like wide-eyed, slack-jawed, and in disbelief. It was a little less than that, but it's kind of what it reminded me of. His face was just a little too animated. I don't think he was as uncomposed as his face appeared to be. The other takeaway about the debate is the moderators were, again, pretty flawed. They weren't supposed to moderate this time. Not moderate, fact check this time. That was an agreement. They would fact check on some QR code. But then they did fact check one time, and then they would mischaracterize. Really blatant stuff. And if you're not paying attention, I guess maybe they could get away with it, but I'm going to play a few minutes here. And it's Vance talking about the problem at the border, which is one of the, one of the big issues. And remember, Trump that's what he won 2016 for. And the Biden presidency has done a pretty poor job at the border, and we're going to get into that. And we're going to get into that later. So, listen to this and see if you can pick out where this moderation just seems absolutely, in my mind, dishonest.
Opened the floodgates, and what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations, and that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of the specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things, regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl.
All right, so the moderators say, well, they kind of lead the witness. Vance goes on to talk that the original question was, would you separate families, right? With these deportations of Trump. Parents are illegal, but then they have a kid here, and that kid born on U.S. soil is a citizen. Would you split them up? And Vance dodges that, kind of. Like, he doesn't address whether they would or wouldn't, but he does say, hey, your guys' policy is already breaking up families, and does a pretty good job elucidating that. As he's talking about these different problems, he says she's let in fentanyl across the border. He does say Kamala let in fentanyl across the border. He then goes on to in detail talk about why these families are getting split up, not just through deportation, but because of this broken immigration system. And he's like, look, these kids are being missing. They're being abused. Some of them are being used as drug mules. And then she leads the witness with a terrible misquote and misattribution to him. Like she goes, okay, Senator, do you want to respond to that? Particularly, like she's like trying to help Tim out on it. The part where he says Kamala's letting in fentanyl and using children as drug mules to do it. She's trying to make it sound like a QAnon thing. Like Kamala's having CIA spooks fly down to Tijuana or something and put cocaine on these children. The way she smashes those two thoughts together is completely disingenuous. And then Walz goes, well, that last part's not true. And he doesn't mean you're making that up, moderator, or you're saying this in a bad faith argument. Like, he's saying it like to be dismissive, like, well, clearly these guys are just making this up. And when in truth, if you're giving this an honest listen, he doesn't say anything near that our government is using these children as drug mules. He's saying the failed policies are resulting in it. And I felt like that was the most biased point of the night. And it was a real head shaker. I thought that was just dishonest and it just left a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't like to see that. It was cheap. And it was very transparently, I mean, I don't think they veiled this bias very well. And the leading them, we saw more of the same. They did a poor job. But how eventful will this be? I don't know. I don't know that the vice presidential debate is really going to cool people off or heat people up. I just don't think it'll be a big thing. But it's interesting. It's interesting, as always, to try to parse some truth out of politics, even if it's on such a kind of a dishonest format. All right. I want to talk now about migration because that is a big issue. And Vance said over 1 million criminals have crossed the southern border illegally during the Biden administration, right? And I think he said some 20 million in the U.S. right now. Now, that's not nothing. And let's just see what all they have to say. He said over 1 million criminals. Technically, if they're illegal, they're a criminal. But for the sake of argument, other than crossing, we'll exclude that crime, right? Because this is the crime in question. Should they be able to be here? Should it be legal? And look, that's a crime that's pretty darn understandable. A lot of these people are coming from situations where I would definitely commit a crime to improve the life of my family. That's something very easy to sympathize. I'll cross an imaginary line if it meant getting my sons to a safer place and a better opportunity for their life. Yeah, like that's I'm fine with leaving that out, right? Okay. Interestingly, though, earlier this week, possibly early last week, there was a document sent to Texas Congressman Tony Gonzalez, not the Chiefs tight end, former Chiefs tight end, right? On September 25th, in a response to his request for information back from March. So they weren't quick about it, right? And when I say they, I'm talking about U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, right? They're responding to the request of a congressman from Texas named Tony Gonzalez on information on criminals crossing the border. Okay. I'm just going to kind of go over this with you, and let's figure this out. You know, a lot of times these numbers are confused, and they're always incomplete because we just don't know. This is what they know of, but there's a lot of guys that are going to cross the border that are just never known, seen, or reported. That's an understandable one. Like the whole thing is a cloak and dagger thing, is don't get caught, right? All right. U.S. immigration recognized the importance of relationships with law enforcement partners. Despite challenges of operating within a broken immigration system, I felt like that was an interesting thing for ICE, Immigration Custom Enforcement, to say. It's a broken immigration system. We're working with inside of it, right? We are removing and returning record numbers of migrants who are unable to establish a legal basis to remain in the United States. So they're trying to deport as much as they can, is what they're saying. And prioritizing the removal for those who present national security and public safety risks and recent border crossers. My buddy, as I was walking downstairs to record this podcast, it is a basement podcast, unsurprisingly, my buddy just sent me some tweet from Twitter that was saying that there was like 1.7 million illegals that could pose a national security risk. I don't know exactly what the breadth or detail of that is that makes someone constitute as a possible national security threat. That's a big number. I thought that was just ironic that he was texting me this as I was going down here. Okay. We are removing and returning record numbers of migrants who are unable to establish a legal basis to remain in the United States, prioritizing for removal those who present national security and public safety risks. That's you, the citizen. National security means will it hurt the government? Public safety is you. From mid-May 2023 to the end of July 2024, they've removed more than 890,000, right? Including more than 138,000 individuals and family units. Okay. The letter requests number of non-citizens on ICE's docket convicted or charged with a crime. That's what the guy asked for. How many criminals? As of July 21st, 2024, there were 662,566 non-citizens, illegals, right? They're calling them non-citizens, right? We can't say illegal aliens or illegal immigrants or anything like that. 662,566 non-citizens with criminal histories on ICE's national docket, which includes those detained by ICE and on the agency's non-detained docket. Okay, so this is people that ICE has in custody and people that are not in custody, which means they're among us, right? Of those 435,719 are convicted and 226,847 have pending criminal charges. So over 250,000 of these guys haven't been convicted, okay? I'm an American. I believe in our Anglo-Saxon tradition of law and among those due process, right? Innocent until proven guilty. That being said, I'm not sure we just decide that every one of those at face value should be considered innocent, right? I think we have the right as citizens to have a little bit of skepticism if pending charges are there, right? Oh, you got murder charges on you? Well, you haven't been convicted yet. Come on in. Like, would you do that with your house? Like this guy, like, hey, Ted Bundy, he's being convicted of he's being charged with a lot of murders. Has he been convicted, honey? Don't be a bigot. Bring him in for some meatloaf, right? That's not what we do. Okay, so I am going to just indiscriminately lump them in as criminals. I think this is an area where we can play it safe. So, 662,000 and change in criminals, right? Some are in ICE's custody, some are not. And they sent tables to break it down for us, guys. These over 500,000 criminals. These are the ones they know about. Remember, the migrants are not trying to be found out about. So we have no clue how many are off the books. But let's get into some of these numbers. Assault. They have in jail 2,300 convicted of assault. 1,500 awaiting charges. How many of those? What about the ones not detained? The ones walking among your children and at your market or in your neighborhood, right? For assault, 62,000 convicted and change, 62,231. Pending criminal charges is 42,915. So over 100,000 for assault, okay? Now, could be bad. A lot of bad stuff happens with people who are assaulters. We also have to realize that some of those are probably repeat offenders. And I don't believe that that's like doubled up, right? These are people criminals wanted for assault, not number of cases. Okay? 100,000. But sometimes you get into a bar fight or something. Something gets out of hand, right? Assaults happen. Let's go to the big ones. Commercialized sexual offenses. Less than 30 detained. 30 detained. 2,200 convicted out among us. And another 1,700 among us waiting on criminal charges. Extortion, embezzlement, family offenses, burglary. 14,000 convicted among us for burglary. Another 3,000 with pending charges. The numbers for the detained, I'm just going to skip at this point because they're very small. The largest numbers, overwhelmingly, from this broken immigration system, ICE's words, are in the U.S., right? Non-detained. All right, let's get to the big ones. Homicide. 13,099 confirmed convicted murderers in the United States, not held by ISIS. They only hold 277 convicted and 50 unconvicted pending, right? And then of pending murders in the U.S., 1,845. Okay? 14,000. Let's just do a little instinct math and call that around 14,000 murderers in the United States right now not detained. That we know of. This is only counting the ones that ICE is aware of. 14,000 murderers that we're aware of. The number's above that. Is it 15,000? Is it 25,000? I don't know. Okay, kidnapping. 2,521 convicted. Another 850 pending charges in the United States. Sex offenses not involving assault or commercialized sex. 9,461 convicted. Another 2,650 pending charges among your children and your neighborhoods. Sexual assault. 15,811 convicted. 4,250 pending charges. Smuggling, stolen vehicles, on and on. But those are the big ones we wanted to go. 14,000. Let's just play with the numbers we know about, right? I won't speculate. We have to know that there's more than this. But let's go off of the numbers we know. 14,000 murderers in the U.S. that weren't here but a couple years ago, right? From foreign countries. Illegally here. We're going to call them non-citizens. We're going to give these murderers that respect, right? And I know you're using non-citizens because there are tons of people coming here for a better life, bringing their families out of these places. A lot of the people that fled to the U.S., I think economic reasons is generally the number one reason, but a lot of them were saying, let's get the hell out of these countries that are, ran by cartels, that are plagued and just ridden with gangs, right? And then they show up here and they say, oh, thank God we're here. And then 14,000 murderers show up and Trendy Aragua is just doing whatever they want to in Aurora, Colorado. Right? How is that fair to those non-citizens? Okay, if you don't care about the U.S. citizens, should we at least care about those guys? We tried to let them run away and find safety, and then we let the big bad wolf right in. Let's put some perspective on those numbers. And look, the rapists, the sexual offenders, I mean, they're in the tens of thousands, right? That we know of. And those are harder to prove than murders. So there's probably even more of those that are completely unaccounted for. But let's put the murderers into perspective. 14,000 murderers, okay? There are only 9,200 Navy SEALs in the U.S. Of those, only 2,450 are being active, okay? So, how many murderers from another country have recently been let in here? Like, more than we have Navy SEALs of. And I think the 9,200 is counting the retired ones and the old ones and the guys that were SEALs, but now they're old and they're in the service and they're pushing papers somewhere because they got a bad knee or whatnot, right? Only 5,500 merchant marines. Okay, you know what there's 14,000 of in the U.S.? Professional athletes, okay? And so think of every NBA player, MLB, right? NFL. And then you got to start thinking like XFL. Then you have to start thinking of the minor league players. They're professional. Then you have to start thinking about those guys that play cornhole on ESPN4 that are just always on the TV at the bar, right? That you never watch anywhere else. All those guys are like professionals. If you take every professional athlete in the world, not in the world, excuse me, in the U.S., every one of them, from Patrick Mahomes to the fat guy playing beanbags on TV, right? And all the bowlers, maybe poker players, every athlete. That's how many murderers have went across our southern border in a relatively short amount of time that have been acknowledged by ICE, that ICE knows about, and that are not detained and that are free in the U.S. That ought to scare the hell out of us. That's insane. And so if you are going to tell me that this isn't a problem, I really don't have that much time for you. Look, the left will often talk about, hey, look, I mean, it's a numbers game, right? We've let in 20, 30 million illegals. So once you do those statistics, they go, oh, yeah, but immigrants commit less crime than the American citizenry. Like, okay, that's very broad. What crime, right? Because the traffic crimes were on that graph too. I don't care about traffic crimes, right? For the record, I don't think Central America, Latin America, I don't think they use blinkers. I don't. I think that like option on their vehicle is about like a cigarette lighter. It's like, yeah, my car has one, but I'm not going to use it ever. But I don't care about their traffic crimes. I don't care about any of these little ones. I'm focusing on the big ones, right? Liquor crimes, I don't care about. I'm not public peace. I don't care about that. I'm asking about murder, rape, right? And these things. So, even if the American citizenry commits more crimes per capita than all the illegals we let in, that we know of, right? Regardless, we've still let in 14,000 murderers. That can't enrich the society. 20,000, 30,000 sex criminals. That's not good. Okay? And a lot of them, we're not even going to get into the economics on this one. This is just about crime. We're not going to worry about welfare and is it a drain and what does it do to jobs. We're not worried about any of that this episode. We're worried about the fact that you're just as likely to run into a newly illegal immigrant murderer at the grocery store as you are a professional athlete. Right? And this is probably just the 48, and you can condense this down to the 48 states. Alaska, Hawaii, you're probably fine, right? These are also going to be very concentrated in certain areas, urban areas, the Southwest, right? It's going to be, Wyoming's not filling this, I'm sure. Not to this extent. There's going to be places where this severely changes things and makes places more dangerous. All right? And so if you're going to tell me, like if you're going to give me one little quote about the citizenry of America committing more crimes on it per capita than them, I'm just like, okay, you tell me. When you find out that there's 14,000 more murderers here recently, like how are porous borders and a negligent government going to enrich us? How is that a good thing? It's a problem that we can't be blind to, right? So when these ladies on the debate are trying to make these straw man arguments against Vance and they're misquoting him and they sit there and mock Trump when he says, and some I assume are good people. Yeah, like, yes, most of them are probably good people. I think most people are good people. But it's very significant. And if we're going to ignore that for political correctness, like, we're going to pay for it down the road in terms of crime in society. It's not fair to us, it's not fair to America, and it's not fair to the other non-citizens that tried to get away from these people. So, all right. That's it. That's my spiel. Really interesting to me. Let me know what you think. Was that a good episode? Would you want to hear more about the border? Let me know. Contact me. AmericanRegularspodcast@gmail.com. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Take it easy.